Welcome, fellow Storm Riders. You are officially a rider on the Hypnotic Storm. This is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 45 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel. He wrote a prize-winning short story, cuts his own hair, and has just richly received some new AC/DC memorabilia. Entering the Hypnoticon, weighing in at 185 pounds, live at the Hypnotic World Epicenter. Here he is, folks, the world's foremost Hypnotic Storm Rider, Mike Mandel.
Yes. Chris, weighing in at an immense 185 pounds, you might add.
What are you going to do about that?
What am I going to do about it? Well, starting the 2nd of January, I've got my entire plan. I've renovated my 4-hour body plan. I've realized why it worked so spectacularly well 2 years ago and didn't work the last year. And I could not figure why the weight dropped away. In fact, in one day I lost 4 pounds on it before, and this time I lost nothing. And you know what it is?
What was the difference?
The only thing that was different was the first time I was having 3 to 5 organic eggs for breakfast with salad.
The protein.
Yeah, the second time I was doing protein powder instead, and I'm convinced there is some sugar or simple carb in the protein powder I'm taking because it's so sweet.
That makes sense, and the one I take has stevia
Of course
in
it does, Chris. I'm a doctor.
Yes, okay, but just not that
just
kind.
Just not that kind. Now, I noticed you
I love
said
that line.
he cuts his... You're still coughing, buddy.
Cuts his
I noticed
own
you
hair.
said he cuts his own hair, yes, but I don't make my own clothes.
No.
And the funny thing is, that was an insult I used on stage once, and Paul Moyer still talks about it. I was on stage. There was a guy in the audience, and he was mouthing off. I can't remember why. And I kept trying to shut him up. Trying is the word. And it wasn't working. And finally, I just stopped, and I smiled at him from the stage with the microphone. I said,
You make your own
I
clothes.
said, you cut your own hair, don't you? And he went, what? I said, you cut your own hair and you make your own clothes. And everyone just burst out laughing. Implication was he looked such an incredible buffoon that no one could believe it. Yes, language, the power of language to enjoy life and renovate other people's lives. So go on.
So later on this, I hope we get to talk about some of the funny things that we've come up with. We have a huge list of hilarious things that you
we're
can
not
do
going to give away
with
on this
people.
because we want to do this as a free app.
Oh, or just even an app.
An expensive app.
I was going to say it doesn't have to be an app too. It can be just like a segment of our website.
Okay, yes,
but it would
I'd love to
definitely
have
be.
it
I want it to be mobile ready and all that.
We've got so many funny things that you can do to annoy and irritate and confuse and confound other people. Let's just address one more point quickly, Chris,
Right.
which is you had alluded to the fact that I had just received a brand new, richly received some more AC/DC memorabilia.
Yeah,
now,
tell me about
some
it.
of you know I have all sorts of it, including one of Angus Young's picks, a guitar he's played, all sorts of things. Anyway, a very dear friend of mine, Nancy Hunter. Yes, Nancy Hunter, the phenomenal Toronto therapist, amazing hypnotist. We drove her to a party yesterday, and she said, I've left a present in the car for you. My husband found it for you, and she said, I know you're going to like it. Well, he runs Mike's Music in Toronto. He's an amazing guitarist. Used to be in a band called Breathless many years ago. He's a guy my age. Anyway, she gets out of the car. There's a box there. I opened it when I got home, and to the amazement of my wife and I, it was a first pressing white label edition of the vinyl album Flick of the Switch, AC/DC, from years and years ago, hand-signed by Brian Johnson, the singer, and originally presented to Q107 Rock Radio, and somehow they got this for me. So if it has been stolen from Q107, all of this, of course, is completely deniable. We'll edit that out. So continue. Let's talk about hypnosis and NLP and stuff.
Hilarious. Let's do about it. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about what's been in the news lately. There was this story, because you and I both have a Google alert set for hypnosis, so and most of it's crap that comes in, I have to say, but sometimes there's interesting stuff. And there was a situation where I think it was a train engineer crashed, had some sort of derailment. I don't remember all the specifics of it, but his lawyer, the defense lawyer in charge of the case, because they were going to charge him with some kind of crime, right? And the defense was, well, he was in a state of highway hypnosis, I believe.
Well, railway hypnosis in this case.
So let's talk about what, because that's a term that's out there. Let's talk about what it means. Let's talk about whether this is actually a valid defense or not. Not that we're lawyers. That's for other trainers.
As to whether or not, yes. Okay, we're going to have to edit that one out. I can't speak as to whether or not it is a valid legal defense, but I can tell you that highway hypnosis is a real thing. And having said that, we've all had those occasions when late at night, especially coming home, you might have some smooth music blasting in your car stereo, or maybe not blasting, but playing, and you sort of zone out and you're driving unconsciously. And then you get home and you're in your driveway and you could recall almost nothing as far as the trip goes because you have been in a trance. Now, driving produces a very specific trance, especially at night, and especially with music or something playing, which will enhance that sensation. But I would think, Chris, that regardless of any assumed use as a legal defense, you would see that you would think that railway hypnosis would be more profound than highway hypnosis. And can you imagine why? Not that trains have better stereos.
I would imagine because you don't need to actually steer it. You don't need to do those little micromotor corrections.
That's something I didn't even take into account, but I will add that. That's very good spotting. Train spotting in this case.
Good one.
Do you know what I'm thinking?
What are you thinking?
The convergence phenomenon.
Yeah,
the railway tracks ahead of you are consistent. You're not usually seeing, cars crossing in front of you or anything. You're going to be going through level crossings and that periodically. But there would be a convergence of the tracks on the horizon. And I think it would have more of a hypnotic effect than you would get with roads and other cars and so on.
Or maybe,
As to whether or not this actually occurred, I think the person would be more liable to fall asleep than probably lose their mind and do their job badly. Though.
Well, and so what you were just talking about with the convergence phenomenon, it reminds me of my friend Don. He used to do a lot of cross Canada road trips and driving across the prairies, very flat and long, and basically the road just seems to go on, and you see the lights of a city ahead, and it's really like 100 kilometers forward, and you'd probably get that same sort of thing. Well,
remember what the convergence phenomena is.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know.
When you look down a building or something and
parallel lines meet at the horizon.
Right.
And so railway tracks especially would seem to meet and they would draw your attention into the distance, almost like a hypnotic spiral. Although I'm amazed by the fact that A, people even use those things, and B, how often they spin them in the wrong direction, forcing the person's attention outward.
All right, question then. Highway hypnosis, assuming that it exists, causes a trance. For the most part, it's safe. I mean,
your unconscious mind drives very well.
People do this all the time, and I mean, we don't have any way of knowing whether people are in trance during accidents more often than they're out of trance, but whatever.
And if you're listening to this now while you're driving, please drive very safely.
Most people don't get in accidents that often, right? So, yet we know people are going in trance all the time when they're driving. So the unconscious mind presumably is doing the job better than you could consciously do.
Of course,
You can't make those little micromotor corrections of the steering wheel consciously. I mean, you would be weaving all over the road if you were doing that consciously, right?
Yes.
You only do it consciously when you
don't
first
even notice
learn.
you're shifting gear in a car when you've learned the programming.
So how is there any rational logic here to suggest that the person was in a trance and therefore increased his probability of getting in an accident?
I think it's unlikely.
That's what I
think it's highly unlikely. I will note that you and I are both coughing right now. You're getting over asthma and a viral thing, and I've begun coughing today, which is always enjoyable.
Let's get out of rapport.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're coughing so much, it sounds like one of those hillbilly hypnosis podcasts where the guys
let's start coughing right into the microphone.
Yeah.
Okay, let's enough with the highway hypnosis stuff. But that is an interesting thing to notice when you pull into your driveway and you go, wow, I was thinking about my day, and wow, I don't remember
where did it go?
Stopping at the stop sign, turning at the red light, and all that stuff. But you did it all, and you did it safely. All right, let's talk about. I'm not going to name the name here again, but there is a hypnosis trainer out there who I saw a YouTube video of him talking about Erickson. And claimed that Erickson bored people into trance.
Oh, gosh.
And so let's talk about this. First of all, can you go into a trance by being bored?
Oh, sure you can.
Of course, right?
Like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, as Tad James so beautifully points out. The kids listening to, I think it's Ben Stein, just droning on and on, anyone, Bueller, anyone. Yeah. And the kids are like pools of saliva, like running from their face. They're so slack and tranced out with boredom, but it's not a useful trance.
Exactly.
There's all kinds of different trances, but to reduce the consummate, never equaled skill of Milton Erickson to boring someone into trance and essentially deleting 60 years of his research with a callous statement like that is ludicrous.
Honestly, I have some experience listening to this particular trainer talk about Erickson's methodologies. I think he's clueless. So that's why that's a rather insulting thing to say, but that's why I'm not naming him.
But that's often the case, Chris. And I've said in our online academy, which if you have not joined yet, you need to. Not you, Chris, our listeners. But I think I've mentioned on that there's the whole issue with Erickson. A lot of people the other schools tend to teach either, one in particular teaches that Ericksonian hypnosis doesn't matter. It's not that good. It only gets people in light trances. And even if it was that good, it can't be taught anyway. And that's nonsensical.
How does that belief serve them, really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about...
I'll tell you how it serves them. It serves them to send people into our training instead.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about what Erickson was doing then. Because, yes, you could bore somebody in a trance if we just talked like this on our podcast, right, Mike? People, if they forced themselves to keep listening, would probably get really bored and...
Yeah, just turn the podcast into a Ken Sweatman story.
It would go horribly bad for our listeners in terms of getting any value out of it, but eventually they would be dropped into some sort of completely useless trance, which would have no purpose in their lives whatsoever. But Erickson, instead, was actually very interesting, right? He would do a lot of neat things with expectation and congruence and consistency, intention, and he would speak to you in such an interesting way that it would cause your mind to search for meaning with what he was saying. And you were confused, yet you were searching for meaning and figuring out what he was saying. And just as he was saying it, he would change something on you, and then you notice your hands floating in the air or whatever.
Right. It was just absolutely remarkable skill. The interesting thing is, the only hypnotist I know who actually bored people into trance, other than those who are poorly trained, was Ormond McGill. And I know it's de rigueur to worship at the shrine of Ormond McGill, and I've always said it, an avuncular manner does not substitute for skill. His stuff was so archaic. He actually, I'm sure he was a wonderful man, a lovely human being, but the techniques, I saw him on one video where he's standing behind the guy. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to calibrate him? And he's got the guy imagining a clock on a piece of cardboard, and each number he's saying deep asleep in his mind and going round and round this. And he actually says...
he admitted it.
He says, this bores the person into trance. So maybe this hypnosis instructor who we're not naming should realize that it was McGill who bored people into trance by his own admission, not good old Milton Erickson.
Now, let's take this one step further.
Oh, let's.
If you bore someone into a trance...
Right.
Why is it that the trance is useless? You have no rapport.
Yeah, you just, that's right. If you bore someone, you typically are not in rapport with them.
Are you ever in rapport with someone who freaking bores you to tears? Or into trance in this case. You don't have rapport, and therefore you don't have the 3 R's of hypnosis, which are
rapport, and rapport.
Which comes from the French word
rapport. But since we're speaking English, we will use
the English version.
Rapport. So, yeah.
So I'm coughing again.
You're coughing again.
This is horrible. I'm getting over...
Clearly not.
I'm actually way better than I was last week.
What did your doctor say it is?
He just said it's the remnants of a small lung infection.
Viral. He's wrong.
Undiagnosed. No, we won't go there.
Okay.
So boring somebody into a trance, you're not going to have rapport.
I think we're boring the audience with the discussion.
The reason why I brought that up is if you look at how Erickson worked, he was fascinating in how he built rapport with his subjects, wasn't he?
Was he not? Stop tag questioning me. Yes, he was. And one of the things he did that is very neglected, because now everyone's doing such cavalier hypnosis, they're so impressed with their own skill level, they barely look at the subject. And Erickson would look at the person intently. He'd gaze at them as though what they were saying was fascinating and as though he was waiting for something to occur. And that builds a phenomenal rapport loop with the person.
And actually, we were just doing the webinar this morning for our December Open Frame.
12 below zero here.
And we were talking about the John Grinder's secret of pretending that the other person that you're talking to is the most fascinating person that you've ever talked to. And that's a great way to actually find that they are fascinating, get great rapport with them.
I never saw that anywhere else, Chris. And John told me that over dinner, just the two of us in Toronto. I never heard it anywhere else, and I found it amazing. So watch for it to be mainstream and everyone to be teaching it in the next little while.
And I found myself, I brought this up now because I found myself a couple of weeks ago bored with a conversation someone was having with me, and I used that trick. I pretended that person was really fascinating.
And then you pretended you weren't pretending anymore.
Right, and it worked. All of a sudden, the conversation was fascinating. So in some ways, I want to imagine that at two polar opposite ends of the spectrum, we've got boredom and rapport.
That's interesting. Interesting continuum.
It doesn't have to be boredom. I'm sure you could replace with, hatred or something else. Like you could come up with other painted words, but boredom is certainly one of them. More neutral.
It's a funny thing because boredom appears to be an issue for a number of people. And Chris, in all honesty, it is not an issue for me. I honestly do not get bored.
Well, what would you?
As my wife said, it's because I have me for company all the time.
Exactly. And now, if you find yourself bored,
life is fascinating. If you have a mind, use it. Like experiment, do internal experiments, design new products in your head. You don't have to be bored, for goodness sake.
Oh, you can start using NLP strategies on yourself to improve your life or something.
Let's talk about NLP strategies, actually, because this is something I don't think we've ever gone into in these podcasts. And it's an interesting thing because this podcast is about hypnosis and NLP and self-improvement and energy psychology, all of these things, how they interact, whether we are doing therapy or whether we are doing life, since they are both wonderful models for each other, insofar as life is a means of taking your present state and changing it to your target or desired state. And therapy is exactly the same thing, taking your desired state, making that the object of all your affections and goals and transforming your present state until it becomes that. So one of the things that's useful to know is the whole concept of strategies from NLP, which is when Bandler and Grinder initially examined things that people did spectacularly well and examined the people who did those things spectacularly well and found out how they did these things. What was the excellence, and could it be replicated by breaking it down into steps? Now, let me give you an example, because everyone listening uses strategies for different things. Some of them are strategies we all use. Like we know how to turn a doorknob to get through a door. That's not really useful. But there's others that are particularly interesting. One of them, for example, is on our added material in our live training, which is when I gave the model of price, which is my means of chain reaction creativity. And that's my strategy for creativity that has been modeled now and can be used, and everybody can become creative as a result. Well, one of the best strategies I modeled from someone else was I used to always lose my frickin' car. I'd be, because my wife...
You mean in a parking lot?
In a parking lot, Chris, not in a city. Just
it snowed a lot. Where's
my car? I don't know where it is anymore. Oh, well, I guess I lost that one. But listen, the thing is, I would always forget where I parked it. If I parked in an underground parking lot in the city in a complex area or out in, a place like Disney World or something, I wouldn't pay attention. We're in the giraffe area. But I wouldn't notice where the giraffe area was relative to the rhinoceros area or the ibex area. And consequently, I'd come out and go, where's my car? And I'd spend 15 minutes agonizing over it. And remember, this is so common. People used to put those orange styrofoam balls in their antennas so you could see the car. But then everybody started doing it. So you'd be looking for the only one that didn't have it. And, of course, there's the stratagem of hitting the button on your car remote so that you can hear it beep, but then you still got to be within range for that to work.
You got to be relatively close.
Close.
You've got a strategy. I'm anxious to hear it. I want to know.
You don't know it?
No, I want to know what it is because I want to know if it will work for me playing golf. I don't play very often, but when I do, I know you hit the ball and then you watch it and you see where it lands so you can go find it and hit it again. And every freaking time I'll hit the ball and I see it. And if it's not going to be like on the fairway because it's too easy, right? I hardly ever hit the fairway anyway. I'm not that good, but it's in the rough somewhere, and it's not like in the woods. It's just
a metaphor for your life, Chris.
And I see it land.
I'm a comic genius.
I see it land, and I do exactly what you were describing. I go, oh yeah, it's over there somewhere. And then I never find it.
Right. Well, unfortunately, this method will not work for the golf ball, believe it or not. But here's the thing. A friend of mine always found his car. Always.
All right.
And we'd park in the most complex areas, and he would just be carrying a conversation, would walk right back to it hours later with no difficulty. And I couldn't figure it out. And I would get out of my car, look around, make sure I recognized everything, look around as I'm walking to the place I'm going, and still wouldn't find the damn thing, or it would be a problem. Here's the secret. I modeled his method. And what he does is he gets out of his car and looks around where he is, and he starts walking where he's going, and he walks about 50, 100 feet and looks back at his car again, and then walks another 100 feet and looks back. What he's doing is he's seeing what he's going to see coming back instead of where he currently is. And you keep doing that. Look at what you're seeing on your way back, what you're going to see. And having done that, When I was the relationship coach on Stephen and Chris show on CBC television for 2 years, I used to park in underground parking lots downtown, quite a distance from CBC sometimes. Then I'd have to come up above ground, go through food courts and everything. And I would just keep looking back and would flawlessly reverse the process and go right to the car every single time.
Especially in like the downtown Toronto concourse area with the underground path and stuff. You've got to weave yourself through all these little shops, and you turn left here, you turn right there, and that's after coming up from the parking garage. And trying to reverse all of that, you're like, where the heck did I go in
But this
again?
method will work, and every time you make a shift, a change, like getting in an elevator or turning right, just look back and see what you're going to see coming back. And when you reverse it, you will flawlessly walk right to your car, and it's absolutely mind-blowing how easily it works. So my challenge to all of you is find something you do really well and deconstruct it and find out how you do it really well.
And then
teach it to someone else. Teach it to us.
Tell us.
We'd love to get your strategy for all kinds of things.
I'll post them. I'll tell you what, anyone who sends in a really good description, I'll write up a blog post and I'll explain it and I'll credit you.
Well, yes. I mean, and that's the thing too, Chris. Like, someone asked me how I come up with creative ideas, especially in the comedic department. And basically, I have most of my information in my RAM all the time, as you know, which is why it's so exhausting.
It's ready
and
to
I'll
fire.
just put together completely context-free humors by just putting two words together, like calling someone, rhinoceros toilet. And because they are so remarkably diverse, it creates a new starting point for something brand new. So throw together things that are in your RAM that have no basis in reality and see what hilarious results you get.
I think on the last podcast, we talked about turkey water.
Oh, turkey water,
turkey water.
And that became rooster water.
Yeah. I mean, like that, this it's total nonsense,
meaningless,
right?
Yeah.
In fact, I used that the next week. I was talking to my daughter, and she has a friend who hates vegetables. And I said, you know what you should say to her? When you're at school drinking from the water fountain, you should say to her, you know what kind of water that is? She goes, no, it's vegetable water.
Yeah, that's broccoli water.
It's broccoli water. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So anyway, let's move on. Let's talk. Oh, we have a question here. I wanted to make sure we always address the questions when they're sent in.
Okay.
We do get to most of them. Question from Vera in Orange County, California.
Nice.
What is intuition, and does it relate at all to hypnosis? And can you use hypnosis to get better, to build a stronger intuition? I think that's a really good question.
That's
Mike,
a good one, Chris. I have no idea.
Let me
just kidding.
Let me pre-frame.
Okay.
Years ago, when I was just dating my wife and hadn't married her yet and had children with her,
glad you clarified the sequencing of that.
She used to talk about, having a good intuition. I used to think, this was so long ago. Intuition's a bunch of crap. Like, I treated it like this weird force people had. Like, things just come to you from the ether.
Yeah.
And only, I would say, I don't know exactly when, it's irrelevant, but at some point I clued in and went, intuition. That's just calibration. That's just becoming consciously aware of all of the unconscious things that are going on around. That the unconscious processing that you're doing all the time, you're becoming consciously aware of it.
Yes, well,
making
intuition.
A conclusion.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. Intuition is simply drawing conscious conclusions based on unconscious processes. For example,
not ether. It's not weird.
No, I can't remember who the scientist was. It's not woo-woo. It's not a little bit woo, a little bit woo, to coin Paul Giles' comment. But the thing is, Chris, I can't remember who the scientist was who proved there was no ether wind. Remember the whole thing?
Albert Einstein.
No,
just kidding.
It was an experiment rigged to discover that. It's going to drive me nuts. I'll have to look that up.
All right.
Anyway, real intuition is drawing conscious conclusions based on unconscious processes. So a woman unconsciously notices extra mileage on the car. Her husband's changed his cologne. He's showering more frequently. He seems like he's daydreaming a lot. And she doesn't take all of this in consciously at all. Doesn't even notice. But unconsciously, her brain puts it all together and makes the inference, he's having an affair. And she suddenly confronts him and says, you're having an affair. And he's, and she's done it purely through her feminine intuition. Well, men have the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, with this question, intuition can be increased. It is noteworthy that graphoanalytically speaking, you can spot a highly intuitive person immediately from their handwriting.
Oh, what's the pattern?
You will see unnecessary breaks within words themselves. Now, there's necessary breaks when one must lift the pen to cross a T or dot an I or a J. But when there are breaks between letters that do not belong there, and letters would normally be done cursively, the more of those breaks, the more intuitively the person can make leaps without having to formulate stuff in a cumulative building block manner.
Excellent. So
I would think that if you throw someone into a deep enough trance and have them increase their intuition, you're essentially creating some brain software that their unconscious mind can utilize to then draw conscious conclusions while being more aware of that which is percolating down in the deep structure.
Now, coming back to hypnosis and Erickson in particular, this is a really good question, though, that Vera has asked, because intuition is something Erickson did very well and utilized in hypnosis all the time, right? I mean, I think there was a story, I don't remember all the details of this, but he had a subject on stage for a demonstration. He noticed that she wasn't wearing a wedding band anymore.
Yes.
She sensed that she would be resistant to the exercises because she did not want to reveal the marriage breakup or whatever it is that she had gone through.
This when he removed his own ring and sat fiddling with it, or he put his finger around.
He took a piece of paper, wrapped it around his finger as if it was a ring, and let it fall off.
To show that
to show her that I see that you're not wearing your ring, and don't worry, it's safe. We're not going to talk about this.
Unbelievable.
And it was all just intuition that he calibrated the discomfort in her, noticed the lack of a ring,
and put it all together and created this wonderful little paper ring and made it all happen. Or, as one instructor said, he just bored her into trance. That's all it was.
And I don't know if the details of what I'm bringing up here are exactly accurate or not. It doesn't matter.
No, you're pretty close.
The lesson is the same, that you're using intuition in hypnosis. Essentially, we're telling people calibrate, calibrate, calibrate. You can't see what you can't see. Tautology, but accurate. You got to look at people. You've got to notice what you can, and your gut is going to tell you something like, I think this is the right time to go for a cataleptic arm, or I think the person, that change in breathing.
All of that comes with experience.
Tells me that it's probably a good time to use a shoulder press deepener or whatever it is.
Yep, absolutely. That's very good, Chris. Very well put. And Erickson, of course, was the master of that. And learning, trusting your intuition, beginning to get these unconscious learnings out. And the more you practice hypnosis, the better and better and better you'll get with this. I think we're going to save some of these for the next one, because Chris knows I have to be out of here very, very quickly.
Yes,
so we're going to go into our metaphor and our empowering question. This is just going to be a half-hour episode. And I'll let Chris do a quick commercial at the end for our Training Academy.
All right, empowering question.
Here's the empowering question. What are you going to do this year?
And what are you going to stop doing?
That's going to make 2014 the best year you have ever had. Let's hear that again. Let it resonate. What are you going to do this year?
And what are you going to stop doing?
That is going to make 2014 the best year you have ever had.
All right, let's let that resonate. And while that's happening,
I'll just
have you got a metaphor? All right.
It's a short one, but it's an interesting one. I grew up in a household, Chris, where people occasionally who were wealthy enough owned 8mm movie cameras. And this was a Bell & Howell one or a Kodak. Mm-hmm. My father owned one of each. And they were very, very primitive things. It would have a pistol grip on it. The way you would hold it would be prone to shaking and prone to jamming. And if you did not press the trigger down sufficiently hard, the reel inside wouldn't properly engage the film in the sprockets, and it would fly all over the place and be jagged and messy. And when you watched it, it would jump all over the screen. It was in its infancy, and he would not believe what one can do with an iPhone 5 now. Having said that, my father gave up on the Bell & Howell and Kodak movie cameras, and he moved to slides. And slides were taken with a 35mm camera, when back then you had to have everything processed. There was no digital photography, and you could either have a photograph made or a slide. And a slide was a cardboard slide, for want of a better term, and inside was the piece of developed film. And this would go in a slide projector with a carousel on top and would be projected on an actual screen in your house. And the expensive ones were circular and had a remote, but ours didn't. Ours had to be done manually in a long line of slides, all placed in, and people who owned these would spend considerable time organizing them from their various trips. Well, as is wont to happen in these stories, eventually our slide projector broke, and it wouldn't work anymore. So my father had to show the slides individually. You could still put one slide in, engage it into the slot, press the switch, and it would show up on the screen. And then you take it out and put the next one in. And as you can imagine, this was a very arduous task, which was coupled by the fact that my father would go into these kinesthetic states and trance out and drive my mother crazy. So he'd put a slide on the screen, be showing our relatives, this is Prince Edward Island. And we spent 2 weeks there, and they'd change it to the next slide, and he'd start getting drawn back into the moment. And here's the beach. We spent, 2 hours on one afternoon, and he starts trancing out. And he'd just stare at the thing with a faint smile on his face for like 45 seconds. And he's got 200 of these waiting. My mom would say, Ken, change the bloody slide. And he'd come back and change it and go to the next one. And I have no idea whatever happened to all those slides.
This has been Brain Software episode 45 with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. Head on over to iTunes, leave a rating for the show, and write a review. We'd love to see your hopefully 5-star review for the Brain Software podcast. Make sure you head on over to our website as well, Mike Mandel, hypnosis.com, because we have an email opt-in form there where you can get all kinds of amazing stuff.
Cool stuff that's free.
Including Mike's ebook, Brain Software, the ebook edition, which is probably the most important thing you're going to love because it has all of the same content that Mike gets paid thousands of dollars to deliver in corporate keynote sessions. And this is absolutely amazing stuff. And of course, there's tons and tons of other stuff, but you'll see it on the website. You'll see what you're going to get. And if you're interested in hypnosis training, learning all kinds of cool stuff, whether online or in live classroom, make sure you visit the website. You're going to see our online Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, which is incredible. And if you just check out all the stuff you'll get in the first month, you will love it.
Students all around the world.
And you can come and study with us in Toronto anytime as well.
Join our community. And the next Architecture of Hypnosis 5-day live training will be occurring in May 2014 at the University of Toronto. And we hope to see you there. Check our website for more details. Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like to be beside the sea. Oh, I do like to stroll along the prom as the brass band plays tiddly-um-pum-pum. Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. Oh, I do like to be beside the sea. And da-da-dee-dee-dum-dee-dum-da-da-dee-dum-da, beside the seaside. Beside the sea, have a banana, the seaside, beside the sea. Chris has got a cough, the seaside, beside the sea.
Where do you get this stuff?